Hello everyone, this is Manisha. We are taking another chapter which is US hegemony in world politics. Let's take the overview first. In this chapter, we try to understand the nature, extent and limits of this domination, the story of the New World Order from the first Gulf War to the US-led invasion of Iraq, nature of US domination with the help of concept of hegemony, assess India's policy options in dealing with the US, finally the challenges to this hegemony and whether it can be overcome. Let's try to understand with the help of some cases. In Aisha case, Aisha was an intelligent girl. She studies at a high school in the outskirts of Baghdad, planning to study medicine in university. She lost a leg in 2003 when a missile slammed into the air raid shelter in which she was hiding with her friends. But she never lost their hope. She is still planning to become a doctor. Another case was Jabu case. Jabu is a talented young artist who lives in Durban, South Africa. His paintings are heavily influenced by traditional tribal art form, but his father wants him to study for an MBA and then join his family business. Similar case was Andre case. Andre is a young man living in Perth, Australia. His parents are immigrants from Russia. His mother gets very angry every time Andre puts on blue jeans to go to church. Andre feels sense of freedom. His father reminds his wife how the two used to wear jeans when they were youngster in Leningrad. All three examples have been different ways affected by us US hegemony. Let's take another topic was beginning of the New World Order. Sudden collapse of the USSR took everyone by surprise. It would appear that the US hegemony began in 1991 after USSR disappeared from the international scene. Two riders. US hegemony did not emerge in 1991 but in fact go back to the US end of the Second World War in 1945. US did not start behaving like a hegemonic power right from 1991. It became clear much later that the US was in fact living in a period of hegemony. Process of stabilizing US hegemony. In August 1990, Iraq invaded Kuwait, rapidly occupying, subsequently annexing it. After a series of diplomatic attempts failed at convincing Iraq to quit its aggression, the US mandated the liberation of Kuwait by force. For the UN, this was a dramatic decision after the year of deadlock during the Cold War. The US President George S.W. Bush hailed the emergence of a new world order. A massive coalition from of 660,000 troops from 34 countries fought against Iraq and defeated it in what came to be known as First Gulf War. An American General Norman Scorow led the UN coalition and nearly 75% of the coalition force were from the US. Although the Iraqi President Saddam Hussein had promised the mother of all battles, the Iraqi forces were quickly defeated and forced to withdraw from Kuwait. The highly publicized use of so-called smart bombs by the US led some observers to call this a computer war. Widespread TV coverages also it has a video game war with viewers around the world watching the destruction of Iraqi forces live on TV in the comfort of their living rooms. US made a profit from the war. According to many reports, the US received more money from countries like Germany, Japan, and Saudi Arabia that it had spent on the war. The Clinton year. Despite the winning the first Gulf War, George S.W. Bush lost the US presidential elections of 1992 to William Jefferson Bill Clinton of the Democratic Party, who had campaigned on domestic rather than foreign policy issues. Clinton won again in 1996. During the Clinton year, it often seemed that the US had withdrawn into the internal affairs and was not fully engaged in world politics. In foreign policy, the Clinton government tended to focus on soft issues like democracy, promotion, climate change, world trade, rather than on the hard policies of military powers and security. But nevertheless, the US on occasion did show its readiness to use military power even during the Clinton years. Most important episode occurred in 1999 in response to Yugoslavian action against the predominantly Albanian population in the provinces of Kosovo. The air forces of the NATO countries led by the US bombarded targets around Yugoslavia for well over 2 months, forcing the downfall of the government of Slobodan Milosevic and the stationary of a NATO force in Kosovo. Another includes Another incident, it responds to the bombarding of the US embassies in Nairobi, Kenya and Dar es Salaam, Tanzania in 1998. These bombings attributed to Al Qaeda, a terrorist organization strongly influenced by extremist Islamic ideas. Within a few days of this bombing, President Clinton ordered Operation Infinite Reach, a series of cruise missile strikes on Al-Qaeda terrorist targets in Sudan and Afghanistan. US did not bother about the UN sanction or province of international laws in this regard. In retrospect, this way merely the beginning. 9/11 and global war on terror. On 11 September 2001, 19 hijackers hailing from a number of Arab countries took control of four American commercial aircraft shortly after takeoff and flew them into important buildings in the US. One airline each crashed into the north and south towers of the World Trade Centers in New York. Third aircraft crashed into the Pentagon building in Arlington, Virginia, where the US Defense Department is headquartered. Fourth aircraft presumably bound for the Capitol building of the US Congress, but it came down in a field of Pennsylvania. The attack killed nearly 3,000 persons. In terms of their shocking effects of Americas, they have been compared to the British burning of Washington, D.C. In 1814 and the Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor in 1941. 9/11 was the most severe attack on US soil since the founding of the country in 1776. Unlike Clinton, Bush had a much harder views of the US interest and of the mean of by which to advance them. As a part of its global war on terror, the US launched Operation Enduring Freedom against all those suspected to be behind this attack, mainly Al-Qaeda and the Taliban regime in Afghanistan. The remnants of the Taliban and Al-Qaeda have remained potent, as is clear from the number of terrorist attacks launched by them against Western targets since. The US forces made arrests all over the world without the knowledge of the government of the persons being arrested, and transported these persons across countries and detained them into secret prison. Some of them bowed to Guantanamo Bay, a US naval base in Cuba, where the prisoners did not enjoy the protection of international laws or the laws of their own country or that of the US. Even the UN representatives not allowed to meet these prisoners. Another topic was the Iraqi invasion. On 19 March 2003, the US launched an invasion of Iraq under the codename Operation Iraqi Freedom. The ostensible purpose of the invasion is to prevent Iraq from developing weapons of mass destruction (WMD). It is speculated that the invasion was motivated by other objectives, such as controlling Iraqi oil fields and installing a regime friendly to the US. Although the government of Saddam Hussein fell swiftly, the US has not been able to pacify Iraq. Instead, a full-fledged insurgency against US occupation was ignited in Iraq. US lost over 3,000 military personnel in this war. Iraqi casualties are very much higher. 15,000 Iraqi civilians have been killed since the US-led invasion. It is widely recognized that the US invasion of Iraq was, in some crucial respects, both a military and political failure. One of the major questions was, what does hegemony mean? Politics is about power. Just as individual wants to gain and retain power, groups too want to gain and retain power. This power is in the form of military domination, economic power, political clout, and cultural superiority. It is necessary that we understand the distribution of power among the countries of the world. Following are the three very different understanding of what hegemony mean. Hegemony as hard power. The word implies the leadership or predominance of one state and was originally used to denote the predominant position of Athens vis-a-vis the other city-states of ancient city. Meaning of hegemony relates to the relation, patterns, and balance of military capabilities between states. It is hard power hegemony that has broken Aisha both, if not her spirit. In absolute terms, the US today has military capabilities that can reach any point on the planet accurately, lethally, and in real time. Undoubtedly, the US invasion of Iraq reveals several American vulnerabilities. Imperial power through history have used military forces to accomplish only tasks: to conquer, deter, punish, and police. The Iraq invasion shows the American capability to conquer is formidable. Similarly, the US capability to deter and to punish is self-evident. Hegemony as structural power. The second notion of hegemony is very different from the first. It emerged from a particular understanding of of the world economy. Hegemony is reflected by the US in provisioning global public goods. By public goods, we mean those goods that can be consumed by one person without reducing the amount of the good available for someone else. Like fresh water, roads, example of public goods. World economy level, public goods, sea lanes of communication, which is known as slopes, sea routes commonly used by merchant ships, free trade in an open world economy would not be possible without opening slopes. Another example of global public goods is the Internet. The Internet is a direct outcome of a US military research project that begins in 1950s. Even today, the Internet relies on a global network of satellites, most of which are owned by the US government. US is present in all parts of the world, in all sectors of the world economy, in all areas of technology. The US shares of the world economy remains an enormous 28%. There is not a single sector of the world economy in which an American firm doesn't matter in the top three list. The economic predominance of the US is inseparable from its structural power, which is the power to shape the global economy in a particular way. After all, the Bretton Woods system set up by the after the Second World War still constitutes the basic structure of the world economy. World Bank, International Monetary Fund, IMF, and World Trade Organization (WTO) as a product of American hegemony. Structural power in MBA courses. MBA structured courses is an example of a structured courses. Ideas: the business is a profession that depends upon skills that can be taught in a university. Is uniquely Americans. First business school in the world, the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania, was established in 1881. First MBA courses was initiated around 90s. First MBA outside course started only in 1950. Today, there is no country in the world in which the MBA is not a prestigious academic degree. Structural hegemony explains why Jabbu's father is insisting that his son gives up painting and studies for the MBA instead. Hegemony as soft power. Third sense of hegemony is about the capacity to manufacture consents. Hegemony implies class ascendancy in the social, political, and particularly ideological spheres. The behavior of the weaker countries is influenced in ways that favor that interest of the most powerful countries. In particular, it is desires to remain predominant. The predominance of the US in the world today is based not only on its military power, economic power, but also on the cultural presence. America is the most idiotic and, in this sense, the most powerful culture on earth. This attribute is called soft power, the ability to persuade rather than coerce. Andrea case. When his parents were a youngster in the USSR, blue jeans were the ultimate symbol of liberation for their generation. Blue jeans came to represent aspiration of the good life that were not available in their own country. It was in the areas of structural power and soft powers that the US scored notable victories. US was able to engineer a generational divide in the Soviet society on the basis of a cultural product. Constraints on American power. History tells us that empires decline because they decay from within. Three constraints on American powers. The very first constraint was the institutional architecture of American state itself. Branches of government places significant brakes upon the unrestrained and immoderate exercise of America's military power by the executive branch. Second was US there is nevertheless a deep skepticism regarding the purpose and much method of governments in American political culture. Third constraint was there is only one organization in the international system that could possibly moderate the exercise of America's power today, the North Atlantic Treaty Organization (NATO). The US obviously has an enormous interest in keeping the alliances of democratic that follow the market economic alive, and therefore it is economic alive, and therefore it is a possible that its allies in the NATO will be able to moderate the exercise of US hegemony. Another topic was India's relationship with the US. During the Cold War era, India found itself on the opposite side of the divide from the US. After the collapse of the USSR, India suddenly found itself friendless in an increasingly hostile international environment. India decided to liberalize its economy and integrate it with the global economy. This policy and India's impressive economic growth rates in recent years have made the country an attractive economy partner for a number of countries, including the US. Two new factors have emerged in India-US relation in recent years. These factors relates to the technological dimensions and role of India-American diaspora. The US absorbs about 65% of India's total exports in the software sector. 35% of technical staff of Boeing is estimated to be of Indian origin. 3 lakh Indians works in Silicon Valley. 15% of all high-tech startups are by Indian Americans. India too has to decide exactly what type of relationship it wants with the US in this phase of global hegemony. The choices are not exactly easy. India's need to develop an appropriate mess of foreign policy strategies to deal with the US. How can hegemony be overcome? The international politics is political without government. There are some rules and norms called the laws of war that restrict but do not prohibit war, but few states will trust their security in international law and alone. A military coalition against the US is even less likely given the differences that exist among the big countries like China, India, and Russia that have the potential to challenge US hegemony. Some people argue that it is a strategical more abrupt to take advantage of the opportunity that hegemony creates. For instance, raising economic growth rates required increasing trade, technological transfers, and investment, which are the best acquired by working with rather than against the hegemony. It may be advisable to extract benefits by operation within the hegemonic system. This is called the bandwagon strategy. Another strategy open to states is to hide. This implies staying as far removed from the dominant powers as possible. There are many examples of this behavior. China, Russia, the European Union, all of them in different ways are seeking to stay below the readers. Global village. In this global village, we all are neighbors of the village headman. If the behavior of the headman becomes intolerance, that then the option of leaving global village. With this, we have come to an end of this chapter. I hope you found this video informative. Till then, catch you guys in the next video. Thank you.